So, time for an edition of Simply Stated here this evening in Michigan. And for this edition, we'll be talking about some of the happenings on the Hill in the U.S. Senate, Mayorkas impeachment being dismissed, a few sort of salient historical items that I've gone through in the past, and some current event stuff that I want to cover as part of the show. And then I'll try to sing a little bit later on the show. We'll kind of see how all that goes, though, because I'm kind of tired. I have an actual life and other stuff to do, and I really don't spend all my time on this stuff. I know some people are kind of losery and it's like all they do, but most people that do anything, some of the YouTube-y type stuff usually have like some other job or, a life basically outside of it. It isn't like their entire life. If you didn't already know that, which I'm sure a lot of you do anyways if you watch the show. And I want to thank everyone who has been subscribing, but for me, I'd just be totally insane if I tried to keep up with some like strange personal goal of like, making shows every day or something. It'd just be like way too difficult. So, and I like to think through the material I'm going to cover because it's so important. Because I have been a witness and because so much of it was related to counterterrorism, major events, and being a witness, and then what I went through as a kid and everything else. I mean, you can't get any heavier. So the idea of trying to rush through and make like thoughtless episodes is just completely stupid. I just have to spend some time on things. So, but I wanted to note this because it's been a while since I posted anything on the YouTube channel for Simply Stated that going back to the Iranian attack on Israel made me think a lot because it was recent. The G7 condemned Iran's attack on Israel, and it was literally like right afterwards, the following Sunday night. But in the U.S. really quickly stated, coming out of D.C. or the White House, whatever, even leadership on the Capitol Hill just said, they're going to take time to think over their options on holding Iran accountable because Iran is no longer sort of hiding behind any kind of veil of anonymity or anything. The CCP has pretty openly pushed for Palestine to attack Israel. Russia, of course, also pushes for the same thing. There's a couple different things you have to calculate into that equation. One is this, unfortunately, I'm going to say up front, and I've said it before, is that Israel has yet to hold themselves accountable for the shockingly high number of so-called Russian Jews that they let into their country who go back and forth and cause problems. And the reason I say all this is because, remember, if you go back to the thought project, just so you know, Kendrick's current wife, the guy who founded the fake friend agency on Hollywood and trafficked me for all those years, claims to be Jewish. He's not. He's tried to use Israeli nationalism as a backing supporter for himself, and it's just not real. And then, because people, like even major Jewish communities have come out and said this guy is just not Jewish. And I've talked to major Jewish leaders in the U.S. who've said he's just plain out not a Jew. And he's obviously lying. And I said that like almost 2 decades ago. So, they're not going to support him in lying about who he is. And the current wife is someone that actually has a relationship with a man who's a Belgium actor, and he goes back and forth between the DC area, LA, Belgium, and then he goes into Israel and he starts fights. And he deliberately provokes attacks. And he really is working for the Russian FSB, the CCP. So, of course, ironically, Kendrick doesn't even have a real marriage with the current wife, who's supposed to be some kind of weird model. If you're still wondering who that woman is, I've spent enough time thinking about it to realize that she's pretty clearly the older daughter of the family that was known as the Kinnears. They're an Indian family, and the younger daughter at one point had come out and said when I was a kid that the older sister was not really her sister, that she was from Peru, which is true. And, of course, the mom made up a big story. I mean, her actual mom made up a story about how she was from Chile and has relationships to the Australians that she doesn't have. She's pretty clearly Peruvian and working with the Chinese, and frankly, something that's a product of really nasty CRISPR type stuff, especially the analysis, which really freaks people out. If you're wondering what she kind of looks like in person and why she affects people, because I'll never forget looking at her. She only really showed up around Dubuque around the holidays, and I mean like Christmas and stuff, spread drugs around the parties and like weird radio signals, and then like made just completely bizarre statements that were kind of disgusting, like she couldn't wait till Mrs. Kinnear died so she could have her pearls. That's the best summary you're going to get of her personality. But if you're still wondering what she looked like in person, the film Stargate? Well, one of the actors in that film, his sister lived in Dubuque. and he would come back and visit the family all the time. They decided to position the villain in that film is modeled directly off of her. So, or him. Because nobody could ever decide it was a man or woman. What I do know is that this person who's married to him now was a huge organ trafficker, blood drinker, somebody abused kids, murdered people, and ran radio signals. It was just totally disgustingly into drugs. And was put up with in Dubuque simply because he provided a lot of drugs to people. So that's his current spouse, and the current spouse has a relationship with this other man who goes back and forth and goes into Israel all the time. And the Israeli government, wants everyone's support, which I'm totally fine understanding their struggle, but they have to actually do something about letting people like that in and out of our country. There's no reason for activists to be claiming to be Jewish and going there and deliberately provoking the situation because they want to give Palestine more control. They have to start to look into and beyond, and I know they're starting to do that, but they really have to look beyond just somebody's religious identification. They're very good at profiling, and the TSA finally moved to do more profiling like they do and have done better preventing attacks. So it's like this is just another move that they can make for themselves. And I just have to say that because it's something that the U.S. hasn't really asked them to work on, but it's something that they actually really need to do. And I say this as somebody who has some Jewish heritage, although I don't practice their religion. But it's just something they've got to think about for themselves. It's just the reality. The other thing is that, let's see, Mohammed Bajouri out of Iran, he's an Iranian leader, that they will do something much larger, a much larger operation next. So they're just going to go after Israel again and go into something even more nasty. But they're now, very heavily coming out. The Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Yeah, they're more than happy. Their Major General Hassan Salari said they are no longer in a shadow war, but plan to attack Israel directly anytime they feel threatened at all by Israel. So I guess that could mean like anything. Like anything's an excuse to attack Israel. And the U.S. has to somehow balance all that out with their behaviors, and the rest of us have to, I go to our country and let us decide what they want to do. And what I would say about all of it is that where I've gotten really frustrated over the years was how much the U.S. military puts energy into going to other countries, and to the point where I began to almost make fun of them because I had known people in the military that really weren't entirely helpful to me. I couldn't go into the U.S. military because of my injuries, and thought that I should somehow just be happy with getting like raped and beat up as opposed to dead, which is a really harsh thing to say to somebody. Just get trafficked, you'll live through it. That's not really the attitude something the U.S. military is supposed to have. And that's what's really not okay, is that a couple of people who were supposedly in the U.S. military actually had that attitude towards me. And they were men, but it's one that some people have carried out. And it's been really weird to have lived through and to have tried to testify to and to deal with. Because who do you trust anymore when somebody's been given a position you think in the U.S. military? Today, I think both guys were actually employed at Booz Allen Hamilton and just lied about working for the U.S. military and didn't have jobs at all. That's what I think. Not U.S. military anyways, but just my opinion. Not as weird as they both turned out to be, because it was Booz Allen Hamilton that's been doing all the setup work and trafficking people for that fake friend group out in Hollywood and fake agency. I do think the U.S. military really has to get organized, though, as far as behaviors in the U.S., because why do we have all this military machinery so somebody can just be completely insane and out of control and run a fake front group out in Hollywood and just traffic people all over the place and do that? And I know they've been working on it. Like, it used to be so much worse, but I'm like, come on, like, let's move, Like, there's so much more to be done than just, like, raiding P. Diddy, Like, let's go get these stupid guys. Like, Kendrick set up both President Biden and Donald Trump, who I believe are both just really old men that have a lot of problems. And I just don't think, I don't know. I just don't think it's a good idea. Like, so you're just gonna bust a black guy? But you're not gonna bust Kendrick? Or Buffalo Bill after all the work I put in and everyone else has put in? Like, come on. Let's do it. And they're both actively hostile towards Israel. I'm sure Iran will get mad if you bust them, but, I mean, they're on U.S. soil. kind of seems like they invited it themselves, you know? I'm just saying, like, they could have got home a long time ago. And I told both of them back at Luther College over 20 years ago that they need to just go the F home. Like, just go back to Russia and quit bothering everyone. I don't need you here in the U.S. So, and I have to say, you know, I'm looking at this, like, I've written it up like a brief here. It's just, I mean, I think the main issue for the U.S. is that there's almost daily issues with Iranian and Russian CCP assets here in the U.S. Just wanting to constantly fight with people. And it's all related to domestic terrorism. You know, the domestic terrorism is actually foreign terrorists here on U.S. soil. So, like, let's deal with it. I know they are, but I just don't think, you know, I'm reading through this again, the history there with the weird boyfriend that goes back and forth to Belgium for Kendrick's current wife, and, you know, that I knew her back when I was a kid, and she was so disgusting and bizarre. And just, you know, the blood drinking, the organ trafficking, and the child abuse, and, you know, the women that I saw that were all beat up and missing arms and legs at the U.S.A. hospital, like, in Buffalo, Bill and Kendrick are monsters. And this person he's currently married to is some kind of monster, too. And she looks like one when you see her in person. You think about weird cult groups out of India and everything else that goes with it. She pretty clearly had control of the Canero family, and Dr. Canero was an actual U.S. doctor or cardiologist. She very clearly had them blackmailed somehow. It was really sick. So, you know, it is what it is. But, I mean, I think there's just a lot more that can be done here in the U.S. dealing with some of these people. And I said that when I lived in D.C. Like, I very clearly said that. I went and had meetings and, like, literally yelled about it. But, it's just important to note, like, you know, I mean, there's so many weird setups out there. Like, I look at this situation, like, Mayorkas was supposed to be, so he's Secretary of D.H.S., obviously a very disempowered one. And he was supposed to be impeached in the U.S. Senate, and they just dropped it. And there was a huge amount of, you know, there was a certain amount of upset over that, with the number of senators coming out and saying, you know, this guy should have been impeached. What do you do? And I don't know what else to say about it myself, because there's really no excuse to not just go ahead and impeach him. Like, both parties agreed pretty much in the House. I think Americans in general would like him gone. He's been a terrible leader. He's very clearly carrying out Kendrick's orders, because Kendrick had said over 20 years ago that he was going to go ahead and have the U.S. all these migrants invade, and then it was just this magical time when Russia took over. Obviously, it hasn't really worked out, but listening to Mayorkas testify is no doubt in my mind that it's Wilhelm testifying. And if it's not actually Wilhelm, what he's saying is it's another person from the old KGB in there. And the comments, he's so offensive and just rude to all the politicians that have been elected by the U.S. when he's being questioned. He's just so incredibly disrespectful. You know, I think even the process itself has gotten old of just questioning him, because he's so clearly, you know, there is something called contempt. And I don't know why nobody's ever bothered to just simply take him down on that. Because the simple lack of respect and willingness to work with anyone is a fairly obvious, it's just a fairly obvious issue. And it'd be better if he just simply stepped down. And I know one of the senators from Louisiana actually said to him, he said, why don't you just step down? You know, most U.S. citizens don't trust you and don't like you. It's time for you to go. And if President Biden wasn't so compromised, I think, with the situation with Burisma and everything else that has happened, even President Trump has so many problems with the fake friend group, that it's hard to say what should even be done anymore. I mean, you're looking at a presidential election when either president's elected is going to be really respected or trusted. And I don't even know where that puts their actual administration. Since the U.S. is run so independently anyways, at the state by state basis, the county by county, even city by city, maybe it doesn't even really matter. Because just simply because of the way the U.S. is actually set up. But it's kind of important to know. And I have to go back to another issue, which is that I'm not sure if I summarized it correctly last year in the Project Just, you know, but I went through a really bizarre situation, not with Josh Hawley, the actual senator, but in reference to his persona or visage or even just a name, that years ago, back in 2013, I went out with a guy like twice from Bumble the dating app. On the third day, he got really pushy and tried to ask me for sex, and I ended up leaving. And I had been warned before the date that he might get really upset and want sex, and or just be weird. I am. That was by the same economist who had demanded that I provide a bunch of material to Dua Lipa, and so what was I going to do with it is if I didn't have a right to just keep my own artistic material for myself. And the same thing with his companion that most people identified as actually being Angelina Jolie, who demanded that I provide material to C.A.A. as well for free since I was having to provide material to the other agency. And her behavior was just really bizarre. I've come to the point of thinking she's just somebody who's like too, I think she's just too overrun with whatever cultural group she's come out of and too much of a victim of brainwashing herself. Because it doesn't make any sense to tell somebody that they should be trafficked to C.A.A. as well as the other one to create a suit that just doesn't exist. You know, it's just trafficking. So, and I realized that because I went to stay at a hotel or motel that she had put aside for me if I did take this pass for Michigan. Went to it, ended up going through an assault there. I didn't get killed, but I might have gotten killed in that area because it was a pretty weird place. But I went through a bizarre ritualistic assault there. It was like over a month ago, but it's been really horrible. So I think she's just really cuckoo. I do mean the actual actress, Angelina Jolie. I think she just might really be way too brainwashed. So I've seen some signals and stuff that's been put forward lately. I mean, you know, because I don't want to come down too hard on her when I think that might be what was really wrong. Having known this person outside of her Hollywood persona, she was someone who's actually very sensitive and got upset really easily and had a lot of anxiety. So, you know, and we were actually like friends at one time, I think. I mean, unless they just completely misidentified the person, she's just somebody who looks a lot like Angelina Jolie, but whatever. And I'm not going to tell you what name she lives under either. We're just not even going to go there. There's a bunch of pictures of her on Facebook. Everyone looks at it as like, that's Angelina Jolie. Like you two were really friends at one point. But anyways, so whatever. I just have to note a few other things. Like there was always this really weird situation. Oh, we kind of have to go back because this swivels around because she would have been the one that tipped me off on the situation with the guy, Senator Holly. I get off topic sometimes because there's so much to like wrap my head around and try to summarize. But the point is, it was her and this economist that said that there was something wrong with the guy, and so I was able to get out of the situation and just go home because I had some advance warning. But the problem is, like, once you get through that like 3-step process of recognizing what happened, you have to realize that he's not actually someone like this guy. I couldn't possibly identify for him and say he was actually Senator Josh Hawley. Couldn't say he was him or Holly, whatever his name is, out of Missouri, and he's supposed to be Republican. I could possibly identify him for you and say that it was the same guy. I could say it was a guy who looked similar to him, but I wouldn't say it was the same guy. I can totally point you to witnesses and people who would say it was the same guy because there were other people that came to me afterwards and said it was. And Cersei and Wilhelm even came back to me and said that they wanted to sue him for assault. Well, there was no assault. There was no sex. There was no rape or anything. But there was the feeling that, you know, some signals and information might have been sent to this guy to try to attack me and rape me, and then there would have been a suit, and Cersei and Wilhelm would have kept the money, which is something that they've been doing. And the point about all of it in the end is that once you go through those steps and realize all of that I can't verify them for you, but other people could, the possibilities from there are endless. You know, it could have been a setup where they just simply didn't, you know, Cersei and Wilhelm just simply didn't want me to be able to date somebody and be happy. The guy really could have been Josh Hawley, just Hawley out cheating on his wife. Could have been a completely different guy. Could have been a setup by an outsider to funnel money to Cersei and Wilhelm. Maybe he really is run by the KGB/FSB. I don't know. The possibilities are endless and exponential from there. Could have just been a setup to pretend it was him to try to think that they had something on him later when he got elected to the U.S. Senate because they knew he was going to be a senator. That was the big point about all of it to me. And what I do want to say about this that's really important is that Luther College had named him over 20 years ago and said there would be a senator by this name at a certain point, which I didn't even know about until after on the date. Like I didn't realize the whole thing was going to circle back like that all these years later, and said that he was part of the KGB network and that they owned him. So they very clearly, like Russia very clearly has targeted that guy and wants to own him in some way. And I don't know if they do, I just know that that's what they want to do. Isn't that what they want to do with all the U.S. senators though? Like why him so specifically? And all I can come up with is that, you know, a lot of the Russian mafia of the U.S. is centered in Kansas City and Missouri. So it's tricky tricky stuff. And with the way politics work, it's highly possible coming out of the state that he is a part of them. He certainly made some really weird, overly conservative statements. And I'm always curious about anybody that goes too far to the left or right. It's just something to really think about. It's very curious when someone does that. So, the other thing I want to go through is there was a person I was friends with back to the 2000s who made a lot of really crazy comments to my ex-husband, actual ex-husband. Like, she'd go like this to them, which is a Russian symbol for you don't have enough money. And she worked for Rumsfeld. She made so many weird comments. I never could tell if she was on my side or just really hated Russia or what. She eventually said she just really hated Russians, and she hated my ex-husband because he was in a relationship with C.A.A. and clearly didn't value me at all. And she used to call him bipolar. And her mistake there was that she wasn't really honest about the fact that he was working for the KGB. It's called the FSB today of Russia, and didn't really support me quite enough. And was like she did meet with me like once after I got divorced, but there just wasn't the like level of support that should have been there. The clarity that should have been there for somebody who knew as much as she did. So she was still trying to get too much for herself out of it. And just today, I don't think I would trust her over it for any reason. And she owns a lot of real estate and sells a lot of real estate down in Miami, which is like Russian commie central in the U.S. So I think that woman just ended up looking like another dookie wookie, like Russian asset. I don't know. But some of this stuff is just too crazy. But I also have to add, very finally, Taylor Swift, quote unquote, Taylor Swift's career appears to be imploding. Everyone hates her new album. I mean, on the legitimate critic sites. This is really weird. The rapper Drake released a song calling her a gay man who likes to be on top in bed. And the song Taylor made, saying she's a man who likes to be on top. I mean, I wouldn't even call the song even close to being misogynistic, because she's really nasty. And, you know, I've seen some of the women that she had, like, arms and legs ripped off of, and people that were totally brain damaged in the hospital because of her network. I mean, Buffalo Bill really does beat people up and kill them over trying to get material for her. And I mean, I think that's one of the situations where the U.S. military really went about as far as they possibly could, at least at that time, in dealing with him. But I mean, he's definitely somebody to get after. And maybe they have, and that's why she just doesn't have anything decent anymore. Because I was able to get the trafficking on, like, of me done, you know, stop after the album Midnights. And I only worked on that, like, partially. She had a few hits that I wrote, and then I managed to get out of it. But, I mean, I don't think there was any excuse for it to have gone on as long as it did. It's a little weird, so. I have to also know another one who's falling apart in the media is Gwen Stefani. Showed up at Coachella, the festival that I would not go to. Apparently, they like threw Nikki or Paris Hilton out of the ABA area, so Taylor Swift could like take over there, which is really weird. And Gwen Stefani is basically dressed like Pinhead at Coachella. I saw her costume. I was like, this is so weird. She looks completely psycho. The other thing is that she went to the C.A.A. Awards dressed in a red dot dress, which looked like she had shot someone. And it was just like covered in blood. Like, it looks really, really weird. And I think it was really, it's like one of the first times I looked at her and went, this woman is really Iranian and really out to just be offensive to the U.S. And I mean, she's part of the fake front group, so, you know, sometimes you just gotta put together and say, well, that's all it is. That's just what it is. So, anyways, I don't have a song really today. I don't know. I was thinking about singing one of the songs I wrote for you all, but I didn't really bring all my stuff with me to like play the music on all of it and like just get it all out for you. So, I think I'm just gonna go ahead with like a little riff on the old nursery rhyme song I used to sing as a kid. Anyway, twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Very popular song back in Dubuque for the kids to sing, and I now think today that the problem was that people really just couldn't tell what was going on anymore. They got to a point where anything and everything was questionable, even just stars in the sky. So this has been another edition of Simply Stated. Thank you.